morning. We could all grab our seats. That would be terrific. So we've definitely hit one of our goals today with this event, because part of the launch of the ProTrack, which I can't thank you enough for joining us today for, and the whole experience over the weekend, but one of the main goals of the ProTrack was to create an environment for networking. And over the course of the past 6 years, every time we have this event and we do research on site and ask women what they want more of, networking is at the top of the list. They want to understand how to meet other successful women, exchange ideas, create long-lasting relationships, figure out how to open doors for each other, how to become entrepreneurs together. And so we let you have a little more fun this morning and didn't start exactly on time because we were watching the chemistry in the room. And I thank you for that. So give yourselves a big round of applause for hitting the first goal of this experience. For those of you who I haven't met today, I'm Monique Manzo. I'm the Vice President and Publisher of People in Espanol. I've been at it for about 7 years, and I absolutely adore my job. On behalf of our Editor-in-Chief, Armando Correa, who you'll see walking around today as you experience the rest of the workshops and Inspiration Alley and the main stage, we're really happy to welcome you here. The team has put in a lot of work to create a really rich experience for you. One of the things that we want to do with this experience is to shine a light on the amazing, amazing work that Latinos are doing in our country, right? And galvanize this community to come together in strength, to help open doors for each other, and to help overcome challenges. And this is one of those steps in doing that. U.S. Hispanic women are experiencing a tremendous amount of success right now in their lives. That's not a secret. But they're also at the epicenter of a political shift and a cultural shift. So they're getting college degrees at a higher rate than ever before. The number of women growing every day means that we're shaping the labor force. But at the same time, we as women, Latino women, are facing discussions around DACA, immigration reform, #MeToo, #Time's Up, and a lot is going on in our lives. All women in this country, right, are facing challenges to break the glass ceiling. Just think about how violent that term even is, right? Breaking the glass ceiling. The fact that we have to describe what we do every day as breaking the glass ceiling is jarring when you actually think about that. But despite the fact that all women are experiencing these challenges, there are challenges that are unique to Latinos. Some of those challenges are cultural, some of those are those political discussions that I just mentioned, and then one of the biggest challenges that she's experiencing is the differences in pay, right? Pay gap. And the pay gap for Latinas isn't just between genders. So yes, there's a huge pay gap between men and women overall in this country, but for Latinas, it's further exacerbated, okay? For Latinas, they're making 50% of what a man makes. Okay, 50%, okay, that's a huge difference. But in addition to that, they're making 30% less than non-Hispanic Caucasian women. And they're making 18% less than African American women. So we all have to think about, what's the cause of that? How do we improve that? We hope to have this experience for years to come. And I want to stand up here the next time and not even have to talk about those differences at some point if we're successful in all of this. It's why this event and events like you'll experience today are so important, because we have to make sure that we know our voice, right? So the theme this year for Poderosas is Cree en Ti, #Cree en Ti. You'll see that. Hopefully you're following all the editors, you're following at People in Espanol, #Poderosas, 25 Poderosas. But Cree en Ti is really what we want to talk about. Believe in yourself, find your voice, help other women along the way find their voice, because you don't want to be the only one talking about what our challenges are. You want other women who look like you and face the same challenges to be talking about the same things. So, you know, as we rise up, we got to lift those behind us, because you don't want to be the only one at the boardroom table talking about what Latinas are facing. You want another Latina to say, no, I agree that these are the changes that need to be made. So those are my thoughts for this morning. There is nobody better to bring this to life than the two ladies who I know many of you have already met, and Nellie will talk a little bit more about Rosie's background. I have the distinct pleasure of introducing Nellie Galan, who has been a friend, a mentor, an inspiration since the day that I joined People en Español, and certainly, you know, in my virtual world as I followed her before that. She was the first Latina president of entertainment for a U.S. television network. She's an Emmy Award-winning producer of over 700 television shows, both in English and Spanish. She's the founder of the Adelante movement, so if you're not following her already on the Adelante movement, you want your newsletter, let me tell you, because on tough mornings, I open that baby up and I'm like, yeah! It's empowering, right? And that's what she's about. She's about empowering, but in addition to empowering, she's about giving you the practical, tactical tools. So it's really great when somebody makes you feel good, but then what's the next step, right? And I feel like that's where her secret sauce is. So without further ado, I give you Miss Nellie Galan.
Because those of you that read my newsletter and that follow us, you know that I believe that everything is about women in America y Latinas that are hidden figures. You know, we know about a lot of celebrities and we follow a lot of actresses and musicians and athletes, but where the real power is becoming self-made. And whether you work for other people or you work for yourself, it's finding your own path. And I always tell women, I'm not J-Lo, I'm not Beyonce, and yet you can all do what I've done, because if I did it, you can do it, right? I am so excited to introduce you to a very good friend of mine. From the day I met her, I fell in love with her because she's increíble. She is our 43rd, right? U.S. Treasurer of the United States of America. To be something, you have to see someone like you that did it. Pero como sabemos, it's not easy, right? So before I introduce you to Rosie Rios, who is, se van a friquear because she's great, let's watch a short video about who she is and what she does. Okay, chicas, is that not incredible? Pull out your money. She's in your money. And she'll sign your money later if you're nice. Okay, Rosie, I'm going to stand because I get excited about talking. First of all, we have to all know how, because you know what? We see someone working for a president of the United States, and you are this kid of a single mom of 9 children, single mom. How does that happen? And I know you love your mom, so tell us the whole story and how she raised you guys and how you did it.
Thank you. First of all, thank you so much to Monique and Sasha and all the Ruben, all the wonderful people who made this possible this morning, and of course, Nellie. I'm thrilled to be here. I'm a big fan of People en Español for so many reasons, so thank you. Thank you so much. My mom is my hero to this day. In fact, she's back in the Bay Area watching my 3 dogs, my babies. But she really is the one who emphasized education from day one. So not only did she raise us as a single mother, she sent all 9 of us off to college. And for us growing up in the Bay Area in California, I mean, really our village, she was our village, but it was also our community, our church. To be able to have the opportunity to go to Catholic school and emphasize education every step of the way on to college, it wasn't optional for me. We had to go. And so I was fortunate enough, I did go off to Harvard. It was an amazing experience.
Let's talk about that, because not a lot of people go to Harvard. I see so many people that should be going to Harvard and don't even think to apply. And I know Lisa Quiroz, who was the original, we love her, and she helped Monique, and she helped all of us, original publisher who passed away of People en Español. was one of your mentors. Talk about them.
Yeah, so for anyone who was fortunate enough to know Lisa, she was mentioned yesterday at the luncheon. So ready for this? I was a junior in high school, and I lived across in Hayward, California, across from what is now Silicon Valley. And I get a phone call my junior year. You take the PSATs, and I get a phone call from Lisa, who at the time had just graduated from Harvard. She was working in the admissions office, and she calls me and she says, we've been watching you. Have you thought about applying to Harvard? My first answer right away was absolutely not. I'm going to Stanford. Stanford is like Mecca for us, right? In the Bay Area, it's across the bridge, that's where you go. And so she says, look, you should keep your options open, etc. We're going to keep in touch. I want to make sure that you have, everything in front of you to consider. So she did. She kept in touch, and in my senior year of high school, that fall, she said, look, I'm going to waive the application fee. You should, again, just put yourself out there, think about all your options, etc. So I did. I applied. I got in. I went. I worked in the admissions office with her for 4 years.
They gave you a scholarship.
I got a full ride. It was
I
an
think we
amazing
forget there are all
experience.
these scholarships for Latinos, and
Absolutely.
HSF as well.
I did.
Hispanic scholarship.
I was an HSF scholar. I was, but yes, financial aid. 9 kids. So I was very, very, very fortunate, and I'm thrilled. My son is about to graduate from Harvard in May. So. But the point is to have someone like Lisa obviously believe in me. There's no doubt in my mind that I would not be where I am today without her. No doubt. So we've been friends for 37 years.
So you leave Harvard, and what was your track that got you then into this incredible job?
Yeah, so I had always had this interest in real estate. That's always been kind of in the back of my mind, kind of bricks and mortar, building communities. And so my first job out of college, I was a commercial property underwriter for General Reinsurance. It was a very extensive recruitment process, only 1 of 12 hired in the country, and I was based in San Francisco. I wanted to go back home. And I did that for a couple of years. I loved it, every minute of it, and then went off to business school at the Hall School of Business at Berkeley, and still continued on this path of real estate. So I worked in commercial real estate for a number of years, and at some point in my career, I wanted to get to the public sector. And so that natural segue for me was to go into kind of local community building. And so I actually worked for many cities in a economic development or redevelopment director capacity. So again, kind of building downtown, revitalizing urban areas, something that was very, very important to me. I did that for a number of years. But how this all came into this position was in the fall of 2008. At that time, I was managing director of investments for a $22 billion firm based in San Francisco, an investment management firm. And a friend of mine, maybe you'll know her, Aida Alvarez, she was in the Clinton administration, a friend of mine also from the Bay Area. She calls me and she says, this was October 2008, so it was the height of the financial crisis. Congress had just passed that legislation called the Emergency Economic Stabilization Act to put the recovery back on track. And she calls me and says that should Obama win in November, they're trying to get together a team of finance professionals to implement that legislation while the Bush administration is still in place. Are you interested? And at that time, I just closed on a major transaction. I raised $300 million when no one was raising money that month. Let me make that clear. And so I thought to myself, I had 14 weeks of vacation that I've been thinking about taking. And so I thought, what better way to spend my vacation? And when you get that call, you can't say no. You can't. You just can't say no. So, but what was hard was my daughter was 8, my son was 12. And it was a big decision. My college roommate, my best friend, was actually already in DC. Her husband was in the Bush administration. So I was able to live with them during the week and then fly home every weekend to see my kids. And I did that all the way from November of 2008 to February of 2009. And then of the 24 or so who were on this transition team, which was a very, very scary time for our country, 7 of us were recommended for a permanent appointment. I was one of the 7. And I specifically chose Treasurer of the United States for many, many reasons. But first and foremost, it is a cool title, I must say. But the primary reason why I chose it was during that time of the transition period where this concept came into my mind about our currency design, and that we've never, in the history of our country, had ever had a portrait of a woman on our Federal Reserve notes. And so I knew that if I cobbled together this particular portfolio, that was going to be my little secret project that I was going to be working on.
So let's back up a minute and let's really, I'm hearing a lot of things that I want to make sure we hear. First of all, that Latinas really helped you along the way.
Absolutely.
And And sometimes as Latinas, we don't help each other. And we don't realize we're all we've got. So when a Latina wins, we all win and we all open doors for each other. So I wanted you to hear 2 Latinas really made big marks in your life. Also, you're in this field. I mean, when you hear her say she raised $300 million, doesn't that sound like, I don't know, how did you do that? Like, we think that we're not capable of doing things, that once you get into a job and you learn it, that it is possible to forget that you're an immigrant and you can't even ask for $5 from your aunt, let alone $300 million from some guy. But it is possible. So I want to talk about, because I know a lot of you ask me these questions, like, how do we do that? You really can do all these things. And then, the other thing I heard you say is, she said yes. Sometimes when someone says to you, will you do something, te da miedo, oh my God, yo no puedo, I can't leave my family, oh my God, ¿qué vamos a hacer? And she said, yes, if you do nothing, nothing happens. If you take a risk, and it was a big risk, it was a big change, right?
Huge.
Rosie, can you explain to us, because I know a todo el mundo le da pena ask this question, but I know it's the truth. What the heck does the Treasury and the Federal Reserve do? Can you explain the system to us?
It is so funny how, I mean, it's really something I get asked all the time. People have no clue what the Federal Reserve is, or even what Treasury does. That is true, absolutely. Still I get that question. So, think of it this way. The Federal Reserve is the central bank. It is the bank for banks. It is the bank for the federal government. And every major country has a central bank, right? And so, if you think of it, and their mandate is really in monetary policy. So, interest rates, managing the economy, monitoring the economy, looking at employment. And also, obviously, they regulate banks. And their responsibilities have really changed a lot, certainly since the Great Depression, and certainly in this last round with the recession. So they played a very significant role in obviously providing a lot of capital to financial institutions, trying to get the economy again kind of up and running. Treasury, and if you think about it, is really managing the government's finances. So it's fiscal policy. Again, Federal Reserve, monetary policy, Treasury, fiscal policy. So they decide, obviously, with their annual budget process, what gets funded, social programs, defense, etc. And so in Treasury, they take in the revenue through the IRS, and they're also the ones that cut all the checks. All the government checks come from Treasury. And of course, my job, Treasury United States, I oversaw the Bureau of Engraving and Printing, where we print the currency, print the
Super
paper
fun to
bills.
go there. You see the money being printed, qué lindo.
And then U.S. Mint, which is where we use the coins, and then I also oversaw Fort Knox, which is our gold reserve. So I had about 4,000 employees, about a $5 billion budget. But in addition to that, I want to make this clear because I think, and this is where it gets a little controversial, but I'm going to say it. So I was the 6th Latina in this position. The 6th Latina. And it's been a woman since 1949. I think the most unfortunate part about saying all of that is it became ceremonial. It became the token Latina in Treasury who's been parked somewhere signing money. And I'm saying that with all the love in my heart, because for some people that's how it works. That was not going to be for me. There is no way I was going to accept a position that was going to be ceremonial. And especially during one of the most consequential times of our economic history. There was no way. So before I accepted the job, I actually submitted a proposal. And to Secretary Geithner, my boss, and the Chief of Staff, and I said, this is what I want my portfolio to be. So I'm the first one to ever have this portfolio, which included this oversight of both the Bureau of Engraving and Printing and the U.S. Mint. It also included, I'm the first ever senior advisor to the Secretary on issues of community development, so job creation, access to capital, small business lending, right up my alley. And finally, one of the most important roles of my job was I was the chair of the Advanced Counterfeit Deterrence Steering Committee. So as the chair, I'm the only person in the world who can make a recommendation on the future of our currency to the Secretary. And that was very strategic, very, very strategic, and I was not going to accept the position without all those responsibilities in place. There was no way I was going to move my family. And so I'm glad I did. It was a roller coaster. I loved every minute. If tomorrow was day one, 10 years ago, 12 years ago, I would do it again. I would do it again.
Just to what you already started talking about. honest. ¿Por qué?
And I say accidental, again, you know, I say that lovingly, only because if you would have known me before I left in 2008, I was a different person. My career was always very quantitative. I never really had to think about what it meant to be a woman in the workplace or being a Latina, et cetera, et cetera. Everything I did, as long as I made my metrics and my hurdles and my goals, I was compensated. The whole world around me, and again, growing up in California where it was already kind of progressive and inclusive, everything around me was already diverse. I never really had to think about it. But going to DC, I mean, going to Harvard, I kind of paid my own way, right? So it's kind of a little bit different then. Very few Latinos. But going to DC, where it's all about constituencies, all about checking the box of your ethnicity and religion and gender, and you had to wear it on your sleeve, and oh my goodness, you know, and again, the expectation of what a treasurer would actually do, you know, stinking way was I gonna play along. That just wasn't something that interested me. But I did find out very quickly when I was in Treasury, first of all, I was the first woman confirmed in Treasury in the whole administration. Second, I was the only woman confirmed in Treasury in all of 2009, when again, we were working very, very hard to put the economy back on track. So that, you know, when you're the only person in the room and it's so obvious, it's way too obvious, you kind of, it strikes you. Like, what is happening? How could I be the only one here? How could I be? So it was during that time of the transition team when we had these very stressful moments of the sky still falling, that I would literally escape. And I would escape to this one area of Treasury called the Historical Resource Center, the HRC. And people don't realize this, but Treasury actually produced all the financial products of the federal government going back hundreds of years. So it was everything from savings bonds, military payment certificates, food stamps, postage stamps, in addition to currency. And so they had all these great concepts and renderings of these images that were used on all these products, so symbols. And every single image that I came across of a woman was not a real woman. They were like allegorical, like statues of liberty, right? Sometimes clothed, sometimes not clothed. But every single image of a man was a real man. A founding father, a president, a cabinet member. And I thought to myself, all right, if you look at around the world, how currency is made and designed everywhere, you will always find a very important person on the front and a very symbolic edifice or monument on the back. If this is supposed to tell the story of your country, why are we missing half the population? And so when I asked the question to the Bureau of Engraving and Printing Director, who would report to me, and his deputy, between the three of them had over 100 years at the Bureau of Engraving and Printing. And I asked them the same question individually, they had the same answer. But before I give you the answer, at that time there were over 30 countries that had women on their modern day currency. So I knew that it was happening. So when I asked the question, why we haven't had this before, ready? The answer? Same answer. No one's ever brought it up. So, when I say accidental, it was like a wake-up call. It was like, you have to change this. And so my little group, my little tiny group, wanted to keep it very close hold, because I knew it could get political. I knew if it got into the media, it would change. And so we worked on this for 4 years in a very deliberate and technical process of how currency is normally designed, based on counterfeiting threats, based on a specific theme.
You're seeing a bunch of them, what's a bunch of our currency?
So I'll give you an example. So based on specific themes. So this is the current generation of notes that's out there. So that $100 bill is the last denomination that was issued. The theme for this generation of notes is called Symbols of Freedom. So why is that important? Because when the first note, the $20 note, was issued in 2002, our country was still recovering from 9/11. Right, so you'll see on these notes, you find, for example, on the $10 bill, you'll see the torch of the Statue of Liberty. You'll see on the $100 bill, the Liberty Bell, the quill of the pen for the signing of the Declaration of Independence. It was supposed to be reminders of how our country needed to heal and be reminded of the values in which we were founded. So for this next generation of notes, my recommendation, which is still the recommendation of today and was approved, my recommendation for this generation of notes, the theme is democracy. Who would have thought it'd be so relevant? But I made that recommendation back in 2010. And I chose democracy based on what was happening at that moment in time in our history. So So if you think about it, even when the time of the financial crisis, right, that turned our world upside down. We never saw that coming. But it also was the time of, the advent of the mass-scale use of social media. We elected our first African-American president, some would say by using social media, but also look at what's happening domestically and overseas, right? We had the Occupy movement, the Tea Party movement, and then the Arab Spring. And so giving a voice to the voiceless, I thought was very, very representative of what was happening. But here's one other thing. It literally dawned on me as we were working towards this time period of unveiling the designs in 2020. What's happening in 2020 besides an election? What's happening in 2020? Census, what else? It's the 100th anniversary of the 19th Amendment granting women the right to vote. That's next year, by the way. So, thinking about that and having the privilege, the right to participate in the governance process, that's democracy. So that's how I chose democracy, that's how it was recommended, that's how it was approved. And that's how it continues on to this day.
It's amazing. And let's write down what you had to do. You had to start thinking about who are those women?
So it was the first time in the history of any administration that we conducted a public engagement process where we solicited feedback from the American public on who should be considered for our current president. If you all remember that, it was launched in June of 2015. We made the announcement in April of 2016, and maybe you might remember Harriet Tubman on the 20. But something really interesting happened during that time, and it was very pivotal for me. So it was August 17, 2015. Ready for this? I got an email from my high school history teacher, whose class I had taken 34 years prior. So he saw my CNN video, and he wanted to congratulate me, but he also wanted to thank me, because he said he walked into the classroom that morning, and he's still teaching there, by the way, Mr. Wilder, Hayward, California, Monroe High School, still there teaching American history. But he said he walked into the classroom that morning, and he realized that at that time, after 36 years of teaching American history, he's never had an image of a woman on his classroom walls. Never thought about it. Same thing. Salt of the earth, I love him to death. It's just something he never thought about. So, again, kind of accidental for everyone, right? So he wanted to change it, and he did. He invited me back that fall. I walked in that same classroom. This is the fall of 2015. And on his classroom walls were Harriet Tubman, Susan B. Anthony, and me. Very cute. It was very cute. But it dawned on me, if one teacher or 100 teachers or 1,000 teachers did the same thing, what does that do for our girls and our boys, right? So it goes back to this kind of play on unconscious bias. So unconscious bias is when you don't realize that you're being influenced by something you're exposed to. Could it be that we don't realize that we're being influenced by something we're not exposed to? And the answer is yes, of course, absolutely.
So it's a narrative. It's missing.
It's a narrative that's missing, and this invisibility of women, especially. Let me just say it. Women are invisible. In everything you see, and in my opinion, in everything where money and power matters. And for me, that was my huge wake-up call. My God, we're invisible. And it's amazing what happens when you're awake. It's a blessing and a curse, because you can see exactly what's missing, and then you want to do something about it. And so when I left the administration in 2016, my high school, Mr. Wilder and I, with my high school, we launched what I call Teachers Writing History, RIGHT. It's taken the database of almost 250 historical American women that we generated through this currency public engagement process, and that we published on our Treasury website. When we made the announcement, I took that same database, and we created this educational initiative that's now in classrooms across the country of how to integrate historical American women into the classrooms. So if you're talking about Albert Einstein, why wouldn't you be talking about Grace Hopper, right? And it's not just kind of images on walls, anywhere. Anywhere that you have to be deliberate and conscientious about how to integrate it.
And I think for Latinas, it's important to talk about this because we talk about this a lot, that the narrative, historical and otherwise in America, is black and white. And Latinos that are such a huge number and so powerful in this country, even though we don't all take it in, we are really invisible, and Latinas are invisible. And so we have to make a difference. I love this image that you have about, to see girls, that girls have to be able to see themselves.
Yeah, so this is what I call inspirations for aspirations. Using role models from our past, from our history, in order to inspire the future, right? So again, if you can see it, you can be it, but this is more than that. This is honoring our history of historical American women And can you imagine what this is actually something I got in the mail. I love this. It's one of my favorites. You'll find it hanging at home. It's a school in New York. And can you imagine these young girls actually drawing themselves onto currency, right? Future history makers. That's a big deal. It's a really big deal. And it's also, you know, especially for young girls, I talk about this a lot. I call it kind of these confidence deficits. It's worse for Latinas for so many reasons, but especially for young girls, and especially, well, one, when they start school, two, when they first take algebra, usually in middle school, and three, when they start college. That vulnerability of those milestones is very, very important in terms of what we need to do for our own daughters and for ourselves as we think about kind of these next steps. And so I really focus on those areas. It's funny, I've been talking about this for a long time, and now there's, of course, research that justifies all of this. So there was a Science magazine article that came out in January of 2017, right after I left the administration, and it brought everything home. And it basically said that when girls start to question their intellectual ability, it actually starts very, very young. And there are 3 takeaways from this. Ready for this? 6-year-old girls are less likely to think that they're really, really smart. 6-year-old girls are less likely to pursue activities where you have to be really, really smart. And that the biggest questioning of this starts between the ages of 5 and 7. Why? School, right? So as much as you think you can protect them at home, once they get into the real world, whether it's the mean girls, the other boys, what they're not saying on their classroom walls, or what they're not taught, now social media, all of that makes a difference in again, the confidence of these young girls. And so that's when you got to be a little bit more, again, conscientious and deliberate. But you know what's interesting about even my own awakening? This database that we produced for Treasury, the almost 250 historical American women, it wasn't until I left and launched, and about to launch Teachers Writing History, where it dawned on me. Ready for this? Out of all those hundreds of women in that database, not one Latina. Not one. So, it was my database. I can do whatever I want with it. So, of course, I changed it. I added Jovita Hidad, who was a journalist during the revolution, and then Emily Montemayor. She was one of the first executives of Lula. So, you know, for me, again, I mean, you don't realize how asleep you are until you look for it. You have to look for it. And then again, once you realize what's missing, it's actually not that difficult to change. I want to give one more example. So when I left and I launched Writing History, RIGHT, Teachers Writing History, the first one, when I left the administration, I noticed, you know, in DC, of course, how else do we institutionalize our history? Statues, right? Again, kind of the physical recognition of women was very important to me. So DC, our nation's capital, where people come from all over the world to see what we value and whom we value. Outdoors, in the public domain, how many statues are there of real women in DC? If you've ever been there, take a good look. It only took me 1 weekend, by the way, to do this. 1 weekend to figure it out. Ready? There's only 2. 2 real women in our nation's capital. Eleanor Roosevelt at her husband's memorial, and then Mary McLeod Bethune, who no one knows who she is. She was actually a part of Franklin Roosevelt's Black Cabinet. She has a statue in Lincoln Park. That's it. That's it for DC. Central Park in New York. Central Park in New York, there are 23 statues of real people. Can you name the women? Ready? Mother Goose, Alice in Wonderland, and Juliet. San Francisco, my hometown, probably one of the most progressive and inclusive cities, some might say, in the world. How many women outdoors in the public domain? Statues? 0. So, I started my little road trip. Everywhere I'm going, I'm talking about this. This is what happens. First time I'm talking about this in DC, a woman comes up to me and she says, "Oh my God, I had no idea about Central Park." She says, "I'm from New York Life, the New York Life Insurance." She says, "You need to come meet with our CEO, come meet with our foundation. They need to hear the story." Fast forward to a year and a half later, where I was the closing speaker for New York Life's announcement of $500,000 for the first ever female statue in Central Park. Yay! Yay! 2020, which is the suffrage centennial, by the way. And it's Susan B. Anthony, Elizabeth Cady Stanton. DC, last fall, a year ago, I was the lead testimony for their proposal for 8 new statues. Thank you. And in San Francisco, yay, 2 young legislative aides heard me speak about this. Fast forward to actually last week, where I was in San Francisco for the official announcement of Maya Angelou in front of the public library to be unveiled in the fall of 2020. My point is, of the top 10 cities by population, and you added San Francisco and DC, in their main parks or downtown, collectively, today, there are less than half a dozen statues of real women. Top 10 cities by population, plus DC, plus San Francisco. My goal is to get all 12 of those cities completed or underway by the end of 2020. It's gonna happen, it's actually gonna happen. But it's amazing, again, what happens when you're awake, and how easy
when
it
you're
is.
in the room, and you
Or
also
when you're
have
in
the
the room.
decision making. I think what makes
Absolutely.
me sad about all that is that how much longer are we as Latinos going to be inside this country as outsiders? Not really knowing the system, not really feeling like we fully belong. And in fact, if you weren't telling us this, Rosie, we would know. And if you're not in the room where you feel the pain of it, and you turn it into something that is action, if we don't speak up. You know, African Americans speak up when they feel like they're not part of the history of the country. Why do we not feel part of it? So to me, that's when you've told me all this, and you've taken me all over Washington, I realize I have to really learn all this to feel like it's my country, and I need to know it and I need to change it.
So I think it's a couple of things. So, you know, leadership, in my opinion, I've learned very quickly that, I mean, I remember growing up, 6 years old, whatever it was, I never thought about at that time who was my president and whether or not they were going to save me. And you have to realize the only person who's going to save you is you, right? You have to be your own knight in shining armor. That you expect everyone else to take care of it, and that's not the case. It's you, and it's you, and it's you, and it's you. It's not me, it's all of us, right? Individually and collectively. And so, you know, we don't have our Jesse Jackson. We don't have our fill in the blank. And I think what people don't realize, you know, this is a numbers game. It's all about numbers, and numbers don't lie. So you probably heard all the stats. We're going to be a majority-minority country in 2045. In 2045, based on census projections, what is the percentage of Latinos or Hispanics in the country? Any guesses? In 2045, when we're going to be the majority-minority? By the way, we're already the majority-minority in 10 states in the U.S. But 2045, what's the percentage of Latinos? In 2045, the projection, when we're majority-minority? 25%. 25%, which is almost twice as much as the next minority group. So my point is, numbers don't lie. What does that mean socially, politically, economically? Absolutely, you've always had a voice. You've always had that voice. And for me, look, again, I have nothing to lose. There's something very, very empowering about having nothing to lose. It's hard because it's not like you make a lot of friends along the way when you disrupt the norm, when you disrupt how institutions are supposed to go. But it's amazing how easy it is to redirect energy. It really is.
I want to take a little detour because I know most of the women in this room are moms, right? Aren't there a lot of moms? You've done all this and you've raised 2 kids. I want to show them 2 kids that are both in college.
Aren't they?
And that you would, first of all, I want to speak about and ask you about what have they brought to you and what have they taught you, but also, why is it important for all of us to do this so that kids learn by example? You know, my son, I just took him to go meet Julian Castro, and I take him to meet politicians, because nobody ever told me that I was supposed to go meet politicians and pick one, and then support them and give them money. And I want my kid to get involved in the next presidential election. I want him to meet all the different candidates. I think that if we weren't awake like that, now your kids are beasts, and my kid is a beast, but they had to have moms that became beasts to do that. So can you talk about that, and the importance of all this for our kids?
So, that's exactly right. So this is all, I'm going to be very selfish for a second. This isn't about me. It is absolutely about my kids. And I think what people don't realize is that I don't really think of what I'm doing as a gender initiative. It's a future leadership initiative. If half your population, 51% of your population is marginalized, that's a future leadership issue. So you heard about, my son is graduating, my daughter's a freshman at UC Davis, and I think I've learned more from them, quite frankly, than they have from me. I mean, these generations of millennials and post-millennials, basically anyone born after 1980 is millennial, post-1996, post-millennial, I just lump them all together. But think about them. I mean, they were basically, my son was born in 1996, my daughter in the year 2000, they were basically raised for the most part. I mean, the iPhone came out in 2007, and social media really kicked off after that. But being raised with the internet and having access to all this information at your fingertips really flattens your world, right? And so when I was a visiting scholar at Harvard for the last 2 years, it started out as a gender initiative. I launched Empowerment 2020, which is basically the Writing History Initiative, and then what I call Women, Money, and Power. But what happened during that time period, and my son at the time was a sophomore, he came to my big conference, my big launch at Harvard, he brought all his friends, and it was interesting. Every time he came to my conferences, even when I was in Treasury, I had this annual Women in Finance Symposium. It was amazing. He came to all of them. And he always asked me this question of, why do you always have to talk about women in these executive leader positions? Like, doesn't it already exist? Like, he had no idea what the adult world was in terms of this. He just assumed all these women were in these executive positions, right? I mean, that's the, out of the mouths of babes. He just assumed that the world was already like that. Because remember, they grew up seeing the world very flat, right? So if you look at a typical profile of a millennial or post-millennial, they're less likely to think about orientation, less likely to think about race, less likely to think about Democrat versus Republican. They see people for people, because it's all what they see now. It's what they see. It's no longer who's sitting next to them. It's what they see in Russia and China, right, or New Zealand. So for them, the world is all around them, all the time. But here's something that I think is, and I'm going to be the Debbie Downer for half a second. I'm always a Debbie Downer, but I always say it with hope. There's hope. So something else happened during that time, in that fall of 2016. So I just launched Empowerment 2020, December 2016. And then I had kind of a debriefing with some focus groups. And my son was part of it. And I found out in that focus group, in the fall of 2016, ready? My son didn't vote. Now, anyone who knows me, voter registration has always been my passion. I did it in college, I did it in the 2008 election for Virginia, when no one else wanted to touch Virginia. I am a big believer, as you've heard me already talk about, participation in the governance process. So when my son told me that he didn't vote, I can't think of anything worse in terms of stabbing me in the heart. Like, how can it be your first presidential election? Then I find, and then he tells me, and his other friends tell me that, his roommates didn't vote, his friends didn't vote, very few people voted in his cohorts. I'm thinking, how can that be? So I thought to myself, I want to get into their heads. I want to understand why this future generation of leadership, why they're not voting. So here's what I found out. So by the way, I pivoted. What started out as this gender initiative at Harvard turned into this initiative on millennials and post-millennials. I wanted to study them to the hilt. And here's what I found out. 2 biggest reasons. I met with thousands of these kids, by the way. Thousands. 2 biggest reasons why they didn't vote. Ready? They didn't care for the candidates, and they didn't think their vote mattered. That the establishment was already so kind of politically institutionalized that it wouldn't make a difference in the outcome.
I'm sure a lot of women here feel the same way, right? I'm sure a lot of you didn't
Ready
vote.
for this? Ready for this? My daughter in 2018 didn't vote.
We have to
So, my point is, this is a wake-up call for me. It's a wake-up call for all of us, because if they don't think that there are quality candidates out there, if they don't think that the messages that are out there are resonating with them, and if they think that everything is so institutionalized that they're not going to have a way to influence the outcome, that's a serious issue for anyone who's thinking about running for office, right? It's pretty, I kind of put it back to my generation. What are we doing? What are we giving them that's different from what they've heard before, that's obviously not motivating them? What can we do to motivate them? And I am a huge believer in this next generation. They are passionate, they are driven, they want to do something so badly, they just don't know what it is. So it's really up to us. And then they have the extra layer of pressure, right, from social media, which I can't stand, which, the extra layer of anxiety. The anxiety is real. The anxiety is real. We need to take and reinvent this whole conversation about mental health. I call it more emotional health. I think there's a stigma of calling it mental health. It's more emotional health. The anxiety that they feel is very, very real. The peer pressure, this college cheating scandal is bizarre to me. Bizarre to me. I mean, I had to work full-time in high school. I worked full-time in high school, and I think that's what got me into Harvard. Can you imagine having the ability to just pay your way through? You mean I didn't have to work full-time in high school? You're kidding me. So this is a sad time, I think, for a lot of, for what we value. And I think it's time to start this other conversation, first at home, in terms of our kids and what they really need, and think about, again, this whether it's counseling, therapy, one-on-ones, group sessions, whatever it is, these kids need it.
Well, and I think this is leading into what we're going to talk about the rest of the day. If we don't empower ourselves and we don't show an image to our children of someone that is doing all these things, voting, working on themselves, becoming self-made, learning about the government, we're going to raise kids that are less than. We don't want that.
That's right. I completely agree. I mean, human capital is the best investment that we can make. I say that all the time, but it has to start with yourself.
I want to put this up because I know there's a lot of professors in the room and a lot of teachers in the room about teachers writing history and how you can get involved. So if anybody wants to, just take a picture, because I'm going to give you a second and then I'm going to show you that Rosie's database that she's created on
It is
women.
exciting. It's pretty straightforward. It's date of birth, date of death, obviously their name, a little synopsis of who they are, and then a public image. But there's something more that's happening with this that's really, really exciting. I know we're not going to be able to show the video, but in about a month's time, I am going to launch this major educational initiative with Google. It's huge. I've been working on this for 1.5 years. It was their idea. They approached me. It's called Notable Women. It's basically, they invented this augmented reality app where they took 100 women of this database, and you could download it, and on your phone you can put any piece of currency in front of you, any piece of U.S. currency, and put any of those 100 women on your currency. So cute. And then it's a little summary of who they are. It's kind of your traveling, educational cheat sheet of historical American women. But there's also a full website that has lesson plans, middle school, high school, etc. It's huge. And this technology has never existed before at this fidelity. So it's huge. Actually, I'm going to be on the top on April 25th. Very exciting. A bunch of stuff that we're doing with CBS is going to launch this. So for someone who can't stand social media and been hiding under a rock for a long time, I know I can't do that much longer, but I do believe that there's this urgency. I do, and I got to tell you, especially for young girls, I can't tell you how, for me personally, my daughter's senior year in high school, she went to one of the top high schools in the country. I specifically chose this neighborhood in Bethesda, Maryland for this high school. A lot of affluent kids. In her senior year, December of 2017, 3 kids died in 1 month, less than a month. All affluent white kids. The first one was an opioid overdose. His parents were attorneys. The second one was a young sophomore girl who was in alcohol rehab, who threw herself over the bridge in oncoming traffic. The last one was a friend of hers. He was part of a friend's group, came to our house a number of times. He got drunk at a party, tried to walk home by himself, and died of hypothermia. And his father found him in the creek the next morning. In 1 month, that's what my daughter went through, in 1 month. And these are all affluent kids. And so my point is, it's an epidemic. All of this, it's not just drugs and alcohol. It's an epidemic of proportions that we are not talking about in terms of these kids and what they're exposed to. The fact that the New Zealand massacre happened live on social media, let me tell you right now, your kids have seen everything. Whether you want to recognize it or not, they've seen beheadings, they've seen jumpers, they've seen things that I can't even fathom. And they are not equipped to take in that information. So my point is, the genie's already out of the bottle. You can't put it back in. But who's having these conversations? No one. No one's having these conversations of what it means to invest in these kids and really think about how to empower them.
Yeah, and do we talk to the kids about, like, do we mention to our children, and do we know the people in our community that are the Rosie Rios and the Sonia Sotomayors, and do we share that with our kids instead of talking about celebrities only or athletes only? I mean, African Americans all know who the leaders in their communities are, and the kids know. And so when talking about this whole narrative,
Yeah, I mean, so we do it to ourselves too in many ways. I mean, I'll use the example. I mean, I love the the National Museum of African American History is one of my favorite places. And it was one of the last things my daughter wanted to do before we moved from DC to California last year. But if you walk through there, I noticed immediately what was missing. I loved it, by the way. I loved it. When my daughter and her friends started talking about, Beyonce and Serena and Oprah, believe me, I love all three of them. But immediately it dawned on me, where's Ursula Burns, the CEO of Xerox? Where's Roger Ferguson? Where's Ken Chenault? Where are the titans of industry? There have been 16 African American CEOs, Fortune 500. I didn't see any of them in there. My point is, we all have a story to tell, all of us. And when you have the ability to show your kids that they can be titans of industry, because your chances of being Serena, pretty slim, pretty slim. But you can be a titan of industry. You can do well in math. You can learn about the economy. You can figure out what the Federal Reserve is, right? So no matter what you do, if you are empowering yourself to seek out a path of knowledge, and everything's at their fingertips, by the way, on the internet, right? There's a video for that. Whatever it is, there's a video for that. It's amazing how smart this generation is. These kids are taking algebra. I think my son took algebra in 4th grade. I mean, they're taking algebra.
Well, they have to be smart. The competition, we're so behind every other country.
Crazy, crazy. And
I want to show them a couple of other things we've been working on. So you've heard about Empowerment 2020, which is really an initiative. But there's a lot of things you've been doing around Empowerment 2020. You talked about the statues.
Yes.
And the different statues. But also, I love this.
Oh my God.
Talk about how you worked with Mattel on coming up with dolls.
So, true story. So what I'm trying to do now is really, I'm just finding these corporate giants, which is amazing, and usually they come to me, which is even better. And I'm redirecting their energy. Literally redirecting their energy to something even better. What I call this inspirations for aspirations, right? So what happened is, the CEO of Mattel reached out to me and said, can you come speak to our corporate team about what you learned about millennials and post-millennials? Absolutely, yes. So I did. This was 80 of their corporate global leaders in LA, and I decided to do something different with them. I'm going to turn the tables on them. And so what I did is I talked about my kids, of course, always, but I talked about, as I talk about millennials and post-millennials and how they think about the world, I talked about my daughter. So my daughter, Brooke, is a tomboy. She's always been a tomboy. She wore her brother's clothes. She played her brother's sports. She was 4 years older, and I always embraced it. I always encouraged it. I would always make her these gifts. There was this one comic strip about Monet Davis, the pitcher, and it was 2 boys who said, "You throw like a girl," and the other one says, "Thank you." And so I superimposed Brookie's face on the cartoon. I made it as a holiday gift for her. But one year, true story, and by the way, what I'm telling you right now is exactly what I was telling Mattel. Exactly what I was telling Mattel, the executive leaders, almost 2 years ago. I showed them, when I was thinking about what I was going to make for Brookie for the holidays, I came across Asian Barbie. My kids are half Asian. I came across Asian Barbie. Asian Barbie was a prototype that Mattel made to try to test the biracial market globally and domestically. Asian Barbie did extremely well. What I loved about Asian Barbie, it looked exactly like my daughter. Exactly. Same part of the hair, same length of the hair, same color of the hair. But if I would have given my daughter Asian Barbie, she would have opened it up, laughed, thrown it against the wall, and ran out of the room. But what I did, I don't know if you have that picture, but what I did is I took Asian Barbie, I bought it for a lot of money on eBay, and I made her basketball uniform. She was captain of the girls' varsity basketball team. I made her basketball uniform, I put it on Asian Barbie, I showed Mattel the video of her opening it up. She looks at it and she says, "Oh my God, this is me." She saw herself for the very first time. If you walk into her bedroom, that's the only thing you'll see on her headboard. The girl who hated Barbies, which Mattel makes, now literally treasures this one that she has that looks exactly like her. So I said to Mattel, "You inspired my daughter in ways you probably never imagined you would. So let's use real people from the past to inspire these girls to think about who they can be in the future." So this, 1 year later, this is Amelia Earhart, Frida Kahlo, and Katherine Johnson, historical figures, very exciting. And so what I did, obviously with New York Life, they made a $500,000 investment in Central Park with Mattel and their historical figures, with Google, what we're doing in a month, what I'm doing with Topps, with our baseball cards. So to make a very long story short, Topps, which you've how you know they make baseball cards. They're owned by Michael Eisner, former CEO of Disney in New York. They made a baseball card for me. I didn't know it. It's when I threw out the first pitch, you sign your life away. All of a sudden, my lawyer called me and said, "You realize you have baseball cards out there?" I had no idea. So Topps reaches out to me, and they said, "Would you mind coming in and signing some of your cards? We're doing this National Treasurer Hunt at one of our conventions." And I thought about it, and I said, "You know what?" I went in to meet with them. I said, "You know what? I'll sign anything you want me to sign." In exchange for, we're doing it, we're making trading cards of my Historical American Women database, which is really exciting. They'll be released at all games are being played on August 26, 2020 with Major League Baseball next year. Very exciting. So I am now on the hunt for any corporate stakeholder that wants to redirect our energy towards something good that inspires our next generation.
Well, and I love what you're saying, because those are taking all this information and turning it into action. And that's what we all have to do. I love this slide where history is making a comeback. I want to remind all of us that come from Latin American countries that we've never had a woman president in this country, and we've had 8 women presidents in Latin America. As you said to me, there's currency all over the world of women.
Today of the modern developed nations, it's pretty much just us and Saudi Arabia who don't have women on their currency. Pretty much.
So I want to leave time for you to ask questions, but to me, your story is so beautiful because it is an awakening. And yes, it's been a long journey for you to get there, and everything you had to go through to get to that position to have that awakening. But you've taken that awakening and put it into action as only someone that's poderosa can do. Hence, the theme of this conference. So I thank you so much, Rosie, because you are exceptional, and I hope you all here, that you can all grow up to be Rosie Rios. We may not be Beyonce, but we can be Rosie Rios.
I love this photo, by the way. So this is only one of 22 photos that I found of historical American women in Treasury. And what I love about this photo is it's on the steps of Treasury. It's from 1913. It's a suffrage pageant, 7 years before the 19th Amendment was passed. But the 6 windows from the corner down was my office. So I walked up these steps every day as a reminder of those who came before me. So this is now, by the way, this is all 22 of those photos are now hung in perpetuity on the west side of the first floor of Treasury. Really exciting.
First of all, I love the work that you're doing. I currently teach at the Miami Business School, and I teach business. And we've only had one female Latina CEO within the Fortune 500 list of companies. And that's something that I try to teach my class.
Is that PG&E?
She's
no longer
and
CEO.
she's no longer CEO.
Yeah, exactly.
So I really like your work because I try to bring that of like Indra Nooyi, and she's a woman, even though she's not Latina. So I have this constant movement of building future females entrepreneurs. I would like to ask you, how will you?
And then when we moved to DC, we couldn't find a team that would accept her at her age and the level she was playing at. So she switched to basketball. And here at that time, she's this tiny little girl. But she had to develop this amazing three-point shot, outside shot that no one expected. She held the record for the most 3 points in any game. And she was this amazing powerhouse. But she had to, obviously Reed pushed her every step of the way to be herself. I didn't care if she stuck with baseball or not. I didn't care if she took up something else or not. But she found her own way of using her own power, whatever power that was, as tiny as she was, she found her way. So I think this is also why I think it's important for kids to still go on to college. Because I think college is the best, and everyone says, oh, you don't need college anymore. College is the best place to take those strategic risks, to find the push. You have your housing and your shelter and you have your food. So getting out of your comfort zone and finding out who you are, where you're passionate, what means the most to you, and taking those risks so that if you fall, it's easy to get up again. So, and I gotta say to everyone, I can't tell you how important it is to do your homework. I know you hear it all the time, but I gotta tell you, I can't hear it anymore from members of Congress who mouth off for the sake of mouthing off. You gotta know what you're talking about. So that's why it took me 4 years before I made the pitch to Secretary Geithner about the currency. I had to follow a very technical path of how currency is designed. I didn't go running from saying, I'm a woman, hear me roar, we're going to demand women on currency. There's no stinking way, not only would I would not have done it, he would have said, what? Yeah. No, you've got to justify it in a way, a methodical, technical way of how the history, case study, precedent, analysis, recommendation, implementation. You follow the same path that you would for any other project, program, or investment. The exact same path. And leave your emotions at the door. So, and it worked for me. I mean, really, when I made that presentation to Secretary Geithner, his first response was, we should do this. First response.
First of all, I have to thank you for your transparency, because I think based on your experiences, we don't get to hear that. Was that within the organization or externally?
I think the best resources I've ever found have been kind of staying true to your values. I mean, I think we're our own best resource. I think knowing where you lack and knowing how to fill that void, whatever it is, whether it is therapy, whether it is your friend circle, whether it is expanding your network. I mean, as many resources that are out there in terms of training and development, etc., I think they're all great. They're all fabulous. But I think more than anything, you really have to know your true self and finding that balance within your true, and this goes for kids too, by the way. Every kid is different. Every person is different. And I can't think of any one resource for me that was better than any of the others besides my mom and my sisters and my girlfriends. I mean, it's true. Those have been I can't use one of them. Those have been my rocks. Those are my values, and I've never, ever, ever have swayed from my values.
Rosie, don't you also think, because I don't think we say it enough, and it's important to say it to each other and to our kids, to pursue people smarter than me.
Always.
To go up,
Always.
not down.
Oh, I completely
Sometimes we
agree.
feel more comfortable con gente que suck us dry like vampires. Instead of being uncomfortable with someone smarter than you. Like we were talking about this last night. We had dinner with 4 girlfriends that are all, I don't know who's smarter than who. Everybody was more, and it makes me feel happy to be around people que me elevan.
Exactly. No, that positive energy is so important. I mean, people use the word mentor all the time, and I think that's great. Some of them are more structured than others. I find my champions. I find people who I connect with, who believe in me, and I believe in them. And so for me, Secretary Geithner was my champion. I'm seeing him on Monday. I love him. He was my champion, and I count that along the way. People, my bosses were amazing. They were my champions.
But one thing I have to say about Rosie is, I know Latinas nos da pena preguntarle a las otras for help. Like we ask each other for help all the time. Like, she said, can you introduce me to your book agent? I said to her, can you introduce me to these people that I want to do something with? Tener la confianza to ask for help. Nos da pena, and then we're not going to get anywhere.
Can I just say one thing? First of all, as bold as Nellie is, she's also a little too humble, in my opinion. And we do that to ourselves, right? We don't toot our own horns. And she's tooting my horn all the time, which is great. She took my son in for a whole summer. My son Joey actually lived with her for an entire
By the way,
summer.
I mentored my son. He got into college. My son who didn't want to go to college now went to college. So
I have gone to Nellie many times for help. And I mean, here she is, self-made, New York Times best bookseller, my goodness, bestseller out there. Read that book, by the way, it's amazing. But we do it to ourselves. We're touting everyone else without forgetting who we are, right? And so I'm going to put you on a pedestal because really the second I met you, we connected. And by the way, you know how we met? I get a call from the White House. I get a call from the White House saying, we got this dynamic, you need to meet her. Of course, when you get that call, you can't say no. So Nellie comes over, we meet, and we've been inseparable ever since. And so
she took me to lunch in the White House commissary. I felt like taking all the napkins.
So those opportunities, you never know when your Princess Charming is going to come your way, right?
And we're about to shop in Prince Charming, let me tell you. Let me just tell you right now, nothing against men, pero
be your own knight in shining armor. And one last thing, people always say, especially for Latinas, we we have to be mothers, we have to be wives, we have to be everything else. There is no such thing as having it all. I want to make that very, very clear. And I call it the rosy pie of life. So when I was living in California, my pie of life was a fabulous flavor. I had many slices of my girlfriends, I was working out at my job, my kids, my mom, blah, blah, blah. When I moved to DC, definitely a different flavor, and I only had 2 slices of my pie. I had my kids and my work, and nothing else mattered. Let me make that very clear when I said nothing else mattered. And that was my choice, my deliberate choice, and I had it all. I've always had it all because I've redefined what having it all means. And anyone else who says you can blah, 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 they're either lying or they have hope. Because there's no way, and in the second you take that off the table, it's so empowering to know that what you have is having it all, if it's your choice. And that's the same for your kids, by the way. You have to have that balance for your kids. You can't spend all the equal time with all the kids. It's impossible. They have to find their own balance, what's best for them, what's best for you, together. So take that notion off the table, and it's a relief. It is, it's a relief.
A big hand to the
and that's why they're here, to help you lift you up, and that's why we've brought them to life for you. So thank you for your time, your attention this morning. You have workshops following this that is exclusive only to this group, as was this breakfast. You have Nellie signing books, you have Rosie signing money. We encourage you to think about all the things that you'd like to see in the future and to share all of that input with you. We are listening, it matters, and